What if I told you that 4,500 years ago, someone designed a cooling system so advanced that we're only just now building something similar inside a quantum computer? Sounds impossible, right? But stay with me for the next 10 minutes, because I'm about to show you a set of coincidences that even mainstream Egyptologists can't fully explain. In 2019, engineers at IBM and Google were racing to solve one of the hardest problems in modern physics. How do you keep a processor colder than outer space while completely isolating it from vibration, electromagnetic noise, and heat? The solution they landed on is called a dilution refrigerator, a narrowing, layered chamber that funnels heat downward and out, level by level, until the coldest point in the known universe sits at its base. Now look at this. This is the Grand Gallery inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2560 BCE. Notice the shape. A tall, narrowing corridor built in 7 corbelled layers, each one stepping inward as it rises, funneling something upward, level by level, exactly like this. Coincidence? Maybe. Egyptologists say it's structural, a way to distribute the weight of millions of tons of stone above the king's chamber. That's the official explanation, and it might be the right one. But here's the question nobody's been able to fully answer. Why does the internal temperature of the Great Pyramid stay locked at a nearly constant 68 degrees Fahrenheit all year round, regardless of what's happening in the Sahara Desert outside, where surface temperatures can swing more than 50 degrees in a single day? That's not just insulation, that's thermal regulation. And it's the exact same principle engineers chase when they're trying to protect something extremely sensitive from outside interference. So today, we're going to walk through the evidence, stone by stone, chamber by chamber, and lay it next to the blueprints of the most advanced cooling technology humanity has ever built. I'll show you what lines up, what the official narrative says, and what's still genuinely unexplained. Some of what you're about to see is accepted archaeology. Some of it is theory. I'll tell you which is which as we go. But by the end of this video, you're going to look at the pyramids differently. Let's get into it. Before we go back 5,000 years, let's understand the problem we're dealing with today. Quantum processors don't work like the chip in your laptop. They rely on qubits, particles that can exist in multiple states at once, but only if they're almost completely undisturbed. Heat, vibration, even stray electromagnetic radiation from a cell phone in the next room can collapse that fragile state in an instant. Scientists call this decoherence, and it's the single biggest obstacle standing between us and functional, large-scale quantum computing. To fight it, engineers cool these processes down to about 10 to 15 millikelvin. That's colder than deep space itself, which sits around 2.7 Kelvin. And they don't do it in one step. They do it in stages, using a structure called a dilution refrigerator. A series of narrowing chambers, each one colder than the last, isolating the processor at the very center from every possible source of interference. Heat, sound, and electromagnetic noise alike. It's an engineering marvel. It took modern humanity until the late 20th century to even attempt it. So why does part of that blueprint look like it was already sitting in the Egyptian desert? Let's talk about what's really in there, because the layout is stranger than most people realize. At the heart of the pyramid sits the king's chamber, a room built entirely from red granite, quarried and transported nearly 500 miles from Aswan. Not limestone, like most of the pyramid's exterior, granite. And granite isn't just harder to carve. It contains trace amounts of quartz and mica, materials known for their piezoelectric properties, meaning they can generate a small electrical charge under pressure or stress. Above the king's chamber sit 5 narrow relieving chambers, stacked like a layer cake, separated by massive granite slabs. Officially, these exist to distribute weight and prevent the ceiling from collapsing under the pyramid's mass. That explanation is well supported, but the way they're stacked, narrowing air gaps between conductive stone layers, mirrors something engineers do intentionally in shielded environments, creating physical barriers that dampen and redirect electromagnetic interference, layer by layer. Then, there are the so-called air shafts, narrow channels, just 8 inches wide, that run from the king's and queen's chambers out toward the exterior of the pyramid at extremely precise angles. In 2017, a team using cosmic ray muon imaging discovered an entirely new, previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, now known as the Big Void, roughly 30 meters long, still unexplored, its purpose still unknown. An unexplained cavity positioned above the pyramid's most electromagnetically active chamber that nobody has been able to fully map or enter. Make of that what you will. Here's where it gets harder to dismiss. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with a precision of 0.05 degrees. To put that in perspective, that's more accurate than most modern buildings constructed with GPS and laser leveling. The Egyptians did this over 4,000 years before the compass existed, using nothing but the stars. Why does alignment matter for cooling and shielding? Because in modern quantum labs, precise orientation isn't cosmetic. It minimizes exposure to the Earth's own magnetic field fluctuations, which can otherwise interfere with sensitive instruments. Labs housing quantum processors are frequently oriented and shielded with a level of directional precision that, until recently, had no historical parallel. Until you look at Giza. The 3 main pyramids are also positioned to mirror the 3 stars of Orion's belt, a layout first proposed by researcher Robert Bauval in the 1990s. Mainstream Egyptology remains split on this theory. Some call it numerology, dressed up as archaeology. Others point out that the correlation, measured against the sky as it would have appeared in 10,500 BCE, is too precise to be accidental. I'm not going to tell you which side is right. I'm going to tell you both exist and let you decide. Now let's talk about gold, because this is where the theory gets its name and where it gets the most controversial. There is no confirmed archaeological evidence that the interior chambers of the Great Pyramid were gold-plated. That needs to be said clearly. What we do know is that ancient Egyptian temples and religious structures elsewhere, including parts of Karnak and the tombs of the Valley of the Kings, used gold leaf extensively, and Egyptian texts consistently describe gold as the flesh of the gods, associated with eternity and incorruptibility. Gold is also one of the best electrical conductors on Earth and one of the most effective materials for electromagnetic shielding, which is exactly why NASA uses gold-plated components in spacecraft and satellites today, and why the connectors inside your own quantum-adjacent electronics are often gold-plated. Some researchers, again this is a fringe position, not consensus archaeology, argue that if the pyramid's inner surfaces were ever gold-lined, even partially, the structure would have functioned, intentionally or not, as a natural Faraday cage, a chamber that blocks external electromagnetic fields. Combined with the granite, the narrowing chamber geometry, and the precise alignment, you start to get a structure that, on paper, checks a surprising number of boxes on a modern cryogenic shielding blueprint. Is that proof of ancient quantum knowledge? No. Nobody serious is claiming the Egyptians built processors. But is it a strange enough overlap to sit with for a minute? I think so. Let's be fair, because this channel isn't interested in feeding you a fantasy dressed up as fact. Mainstream Egyptology attributes almost everything we've covered to a combination of structural necessity, religious symbolism, and observational astronomy, not lost technology. The relieving chambers exist to hold weight. The shafts likely serve ritual or ventilation purposes tied to the Egyptians' beliefs about the afterlife and the soul's journey to the stars. The alignment reflects extraordinarily skilled, but fundamentally naked eye, astronomical observation, refined over generations. There is no hieroglyphic text, no papyrus, no tomb inscription anywhere in the archaeological record that describes electromagnetic theory, cryogenics, or anything resembling computing. That absence matters, and it's the strongest argument against this theory. But here's the thing that keeps researchers coming back to Giza, generation after generation. The margin of error in this structure is almost non-existent. Every possible explanation we have, religious, structural, symbolic, still has to account for a level of precision that shouldn't have been achievable with the tools we believe the Egyptians had. That gap between how and what we can prove is exactly where theories like this one live. So, where does that leave us? We have a structure engineered with near impossible precision, built from materials with real, measurable electromagnetic properties, arranged in a geometry that, whether by accident or design, echoes the layered, narrowing, shielded architecture we now use to protect our most sensitive technology on Earth. Was it intentional? Was it coincidence? Or is it simply the case that certain shapes, narrowing chambers, layered barriers, precise alignment, are just the most efficient way to protect something fragile, no matter what century you're building in, and no matter what you're trying to protect? Maybe humans separated by 4,000 years arrived at the same geometry because physics doesn't change. Only what we understand about it does. I don't have the final answer. Nobody does. That's what makes this worth talking about. If you think this is a wild coincidence, tell me why in the comments. And if you think there's something here worth digging into further, hit subscribe. Because next week, we're going 3,000 miles east to a set of structures in the Indus Valley that engineers have compared to something else entirely. I'll see you in the next one.